welcome to episode 17, Her Finance Talk. My name is Sue Diamond and I'm your host. And our goal is to help women create a better relationship with their money so you can live your best life. So thanks for joining us today and investing in your financial well-being. Her Finance Talk is brought to you by the Her Finance Club, and our mission is to socialize the idea that it's okay for women to talk about money because knowledge is power, and when that knowledge helps you become more independent, it translates to empowerment. Women empowering women is a mantra we love to live by, and one that has helped to inspire women for decades. Where would we be without each other? So today, I would like to welcome our guest, Ebony Langston. Thank you for being with us here today, Ebony.
Thanks for having me.
Likewise. So Ebony, I'm just going to do a quick review and then we'll let you share more of your story and who you are. So Ebony is the Vice President of Healthcare and Healthcare Sales Executive of TTEC Healthcare Solutions. She's a health and wellness enthusiast. She's also a certified executive and health coach, and she is an equity, inclusion, and belonging advocate. And she's also the founder of You Deserve You, where she provides wellness and executive coaching services to emerging and executive women leaders. Oh my goodness, where do you find the time to do all this? It's like, wow.
I'm trying to figure that puzzle out myself, but it's fun having my hands in all those kind of different things.
Okay, well, we're going to hear more about that very shortly. So for our viewers, today's topic is a continuation of celebrating Black History Month, and the theme is Black health and wellness. So this is a really important topic, and it's important because there are many external factors that need to be considered when we talk about the path to wellness. And I think one of the most important should be a relationship or a positive relationship with your medical provider. But as we know, for women of color, this is sometimes a difficult feat depending on where you reside and what type of access you have in terms of not just care, but what level of quality care. So it's no secret that some diseases, affect Black women more than the majority. And some of those are heart disease, stroke, diabetes, breast or cervical cancer, as well as mental health issues. So I know when Ebony and I talked a couple of weeks ago, she was sharing with me some of the things that she overcame when it comes to her health and well-being. And I thought her story would be great to share with our listeners as we think about, a knowledge exchange for women, empowering women. So I would love to open up the conversation and ask you, Ebony, to tell your story to our listeners and maybe share some of the lessons that shaped your decisions when it comes to health and well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been thinking a little bit about this, and usually when people ask me to share my story, I kind of start at the point where, I started to have surgeries, but it actually starts a little bit earlier than that. I remember being 15 years old, so sick. My period had come on, and I was just so sick. I was vomiting in the principal's office. And that was my experience. And if you don't know any better to know that that's probably a little bit extreme as far as symptoms, you
Right.
think that's just normal. That was my experience around, having my period and cycle time. And many, many, many years later, I got to the point of I was exercising, and as I laid down to do a sit-up, saw a hump on one side of my stomach, and turns out that I had a cyst the size of a grapefruit. It was then diagnosed with endometriosis. And as I started to learn more and more about what endometriosis was, what fibroids were, because I also had that condition, it was kind of obvious to me looking back at the symptoms that I was experiencing and expressing to my health caregivers at the time, that's probably what it was, but it never came up in any of our conversations that could be a possibility. And that's one of the areas that, for Black women, are much more likely to experience infertility issues, much more likely to experience endometriosis, fibroids, but are less likely to get actually diagnosed with that kind of condition. And for me, unfortunately, it did end up in having to have a hysterectomy by the age of 35, never having had the opportunity to have children of my own. But from that, I really learned that it's important to be an advocate in your own healthcare. I think in general, and particularly for African Americans to be an advocate in their own healthcare, because a lot of times, because there's not that much representation in the healthcare providers, some of the issues and symptoms or other social determinants of health that you may be going through are often overlooked until it comes to a time where it's too late. And so that was kind of my story and leading up to starting You Deserve You. I was really helping to change my own personal mindset and wanted to expand that to other women, that you do deserve a chance to feel the best that you can be. You have some accountability and ownership in order to do, some research on your own, and that taking the time to really focus in on you actually does result in much more success and productivity down the road, rather than kind of this stigma I think women have of fearing of being selfish or just naturally putting everyone else ahead of ourselves. But if you don't stop and take care of yourself first, then you really aren't able to present your best self to other people.
Right. And I think, I probably used this in the last discussion I had, but I always like to use that analogy, what's the first thing that the hostess or steward says to you? It's
exactly.
Like, put your oxygen mask on first. Exactly. Because as women, we're naturally caretakers, and we take care of everybody else, but we're going to be in a much better position to continue to fulfill that role if we take care of ourselves first. But I think it's interesting as well, just in terms, because you work I guess in the corporate, yes. And even though you're tied to health, I think of, and especially COVID, that's, done a number on women and especially women of color as well. And I just think, are the industries really playing a bigger role now in looking at people's wellness, especially women, because of everything that they're juggling?
I think, I do kind of in my corporate day job, I do partner with different clients in helping to maximize their member and patient journeys. And I think overall as an industry, there's much more focus on health outcomes and valuing, what the outcome of the patient actually is, versus just going through these different appointments and steps in the process. And there's also a lot more talk on health equity, and many organizations are creating verticals around health equity, tied into really trying to understand what these gaps are, into creating equitable healthcare. But I think, there's still many challenges and gaps in, one, being able to connect with people of different populations, depending on what your circumstances are. A phone call may not be appropriate. You may get more success with text. Actually, in the Medicaid population, text communication is a lot more successful than trying to pick up a call and talk to someone. And so part of the challenge is health care companies finding what the right methodology is to engage the members so that they are getting the right care at the right time.
Right.
And then, improving the structure of their network so that care is accessible, so that people don't have to drive 20 miles one direction in order to see the PCP or physician that they need.
Right. Yeah, that's especially when you're not feeling well as well.
Right. Exactly. Or if you don't have transportation, right? If your primary transportation is public transportation and the specialist that you need isn't on that route, that's a determining factor of people staying on their care plan. If they can't get to those appointments, it's much more likely that they're not going to follow through.
Right. So the other thing is, and I had mentioned this briefly to you, that a couple of friends, female friends of color, when we've had discussions around this, I've had some different responses, but one was, well, we never really talked about wellness, it wasn't something that was taught to us, nor, are we taught we have a right to it. So that's one. And then another friend had mentioned, oh, well, isn't that, like a luxury, isn't that for rich white women who've got nothing better to do with the time or money? So I think sometimes, with these messages, women of color don't necessarily then take the time they need to exercise this daily self-care. And if they do, they feel guilty about it. And I think about, what can the industry do that will make wellness a more welcoming and heightening our awareness that, true self-care comes in a variety of forms. It's not just these high-end, expensive or luxury day spas for rich white women, that there are a number of other things that we can do that will tie into our daily wellness that doesn't cost money, right?
Well, I would agree with some of that perspective, because I don't really remember any conversations around wellness, and even conversations around health, because I think health people think much more clinically about, right? Was only when you got sick. You got sick and then you went to the doctor. And other than that, you didn't really talk about making sure you're sleeping the right amount of hours at night. You weren't thinking about how you fueled your body. We knew that McDonald's was junk food, but it was not junk food to us because it was bad for you per se. It was junk food because it was not the home cooked meal. It was an opportunity to just eat out. And so those connections to decisions you can do every day to help shape what your health outcomes could be on your own were definitely not conversations that we had, nor do I think they were conversations that our parents could have had, because they didn't have that education as well. It wasn't a priority previously, and it wasn't recognized that there was a population of people falling behind till I think much more recently.
Right. And I think the other thing is, just in terms of when I think about the industry, so it's like anything. So we talk about incorporate, about diversity and inclusion. And I think, so when we look at wellness, just looking at the industry itself being more diverse, at gyms. So when we're offering classes, do we have, diversity when it comes to the instructors? Because we know sometimes, regardless of where we are, we often look to somebody who we
you relate
look
to,
like,
who looks like you.
or yeah,
Exactly.
I mean,
yes.
so I think that's a key thing, and I don't know if that's something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's human nature to gravitate towards people who look like you. And so the more diversity we can have in wellness settings, the more diversity we can have in fitness settings, the more diversity we can have in providers, the more opportunities, or the more chances you have of people who look like those providers actually seeking out care. And there's, kind of a thought process too that, that person looks like me. They will understand a little bit more of my background and where I'm coming from than potentially someone else.
Right, right. The other thing is, that we have the mental health aspect to that, and of course, for many, many years, there was such a stigma attached to that, and again, a number of friends saying, I've got to be strong for everybody else. I can't, be seen to not be able to support everybody. But again, kind of not taking care of themselves, or, getting to one friend who had a severe depression bout, and it didn't, there was one, she was the caretaker, but the other was the stigma that she felt was associated with that. So I think that kind of goes back to your earlier point when you talked about being in school and at 15, and you kind of thought, oh, you know what, maybe.
Because you don't have these conversations, you don't know that anything should be different. And so, you don't know that, there are people out there that you can talk to, on the mental health aspect. That's definitely still, I think, a stigma in the African culture of going out to seek help from a mental health standpoint. And I think that it's definitely an area that we need some advocacy, and support around, because of not only things potentially that happen in your own personal life and upbringing, but because of some of the things that are going on in society at large, you don't realize how much that's actually playing into your own mental health. Even just looking at the news every day, could be detrimental. And seeking out someone to talk to help you work through some of the feelings that you may be feeling, I think is so important, and something that has been seen as a stigma in our community that we need to overcome.
Right. So tell our listeners, Ebony, about You Deserve You, a little more about that and how you help women.
Yeah, thank you. So like I said, You Deserve You kind of came out of my own experiences of having healthcare challenges. And I found myself even throughout the process of seeking care, and I had about 5 surgeries over the course of 10 years that I was still always, looking to put work first or other people first, and still not really taking care of myself, and until I kind of hit a wall and decided to make a mindset shift that, I really needed to focus in on me. And seeing the result of that was that I was actually more productive, in my work environment, more successful, more productive at home as well. And so You Deserve You is about helping other women make that mindset shift. I work with emerging and corporate leaders, executive leaders, on how to create strategies around how they're approaching their career that has a wellness and self-care pillar to it first. Because again, if you're not focused in on your first, you really can't give your best to the people around you.
Right. Yeah, that's just so important. Just going back to, your health is your foundation,
It is,
for
yes.
everything else in life. And I'm always talking about, wealth is health. So it's really key to be focused on that. So
Absolutely.
in terms of, our listeners, women of color listeners, well, can you share maybe a couple of tips that they might be able to do at home that, will be helpful for them in their daily self-care?
Hmm. Yeah, first of all, I would absolutely recommend that everyone take an active role in their healthcare because, again, Black women are often overlooked when sharing symptoms, and we need to be educated ourselves on what could potentially be going on so that when you go into seeking care, you can have those conversations and kind of push on your providers on um, where you think the problems may arise. I think small things, which may seem big, but take 5 minutes out a day to just meditate and breathe and focus in on yourself. I definitely used to be one of these people who thought it was a lot of woo-woo around meditation, but such a difference on those days that I do and those days that I don't, and really being able to focus in on the task at hand to be more productive. Sleep is so critical. Getting enough sleep at night can set the mood for the next day,
Right.
for sure, and how you are filling people's emotional bucket. If you're tired, you're tending to take out of that bucket instead of fill into that bucket.
Right.
So I think those are a few things. And then, of course, stay on top of your regular preventative maintenance items, your mammograms, your annual physicals, your
Mhm.
colonoscopies. Don't just wait until you don't feel well to go
Right.
in to see the doctor. Make sure you're being proactive and, again, taking an active role in your healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's key in terms of advocating for yourself. I just think in terms of, I know not to take away from medical professionals, but I
They're
kind
an
of,
important piece of the puzzle too, but you
oh
need to
yeah.
know.
Yeah. I mean, I had to, I my parents, it would be like, oh God, you don't, and I think of this today, like I'll go, my mother was in the hospital 2 years ago because of a fall. And they used to run the other way when they'd see me coming because I asked questions. And I don't know if it's more of, it's a cultural thing here in the States to be
Hmm.
more of an advocate than it is in the UK. But my mum's like, oh, don't ask too many questions. Doctor knows best. And
Well,
I'm like, but you know what?
yeah, it's more, talking about the African American community as well. There, I think in that community, a very interesting mix of the doctor said to do this, so this is what I'm going to do, and a little bit of mistrust because I'm not going to go to the doctor as often as maybe I need to. So it's interesting, but definitely I think you have to go in prepared, ask questions, advocate for your own health.
Absolutely. And then I think about the other things that you talk about. I mean, I'm a big advocate of like daily mantras and doing like I do a 5-minute morning meditation when I get up every day. But I remember years ago, people talking about meditation. I'm like, oh, I couldn't do that. I'm going to be thinking about when do I do the washing and how can, you just sit there? Because again, I thought I don't have time to just sit there. And then I'm thinking about all the things that I got to do. But as you said, you think, oh, it's all woohoo, but it doesn't half make a difference. It really does. I know it does for me every day in terms of
Absolutely.
how I feel. helping me get through the day, even in terms of productivity.
Yeah,
absolutely. It just sets you up. So it's like, yeah, so we're both advocating, you got to check this stuff out. You can't just say, oh no, that's not going to work for me. But different stuff works for different people.
And there are lots of great guided meditation apps out there, like Head to Space or Calm, for those who are a little hesitant or need some direction. I have found both of those apps to be really great for beginners.
Right. And I go on YouTube and just plug in 5-minute guided meditation. And
you can find anything on YouTube these days.
Everything pops up. So it's really, the stuff's free. Yes. And it's easy to find. And I know pretty much everybody today, regardless of the economic status, has a smartphone, right?
Yes.
So we can access that stuff. So what do you think, when we think about Black History Month, what can some of our listeners do to support our Black sisters in terms of wellness and health?
That's a great question. I think, certainly any chance you have to advocate for additional funding for clinical trials that ensure there's a, diverse mix in the representation of clinical trials. It's a big area of opportunity, I think, in the fight for health equity, having representation there. I think, we talked a little bit about mental health and just continuing to normalize, that it's okay to seek out treatment, that it's okay to feel the way that you're feeling. And I think, the last one would be to believe what your friends or family are telling you may be wrong with them, and help them navigate through seeking out care.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Ebony. There are little things flashing here. We're down to the last 2 minutes. So I really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today in our exchange for knowledge with listeners. And again, health is wealth. Health is the foundation of it all, and it's the prerequisite for you to enjoy life. So becoming healthy is something you can't just do in one giant step, I like to say, because I think that's the other thing. We become very overwhelmed when we think of the big picture. So it's plenty of small and consecutive steps that will help you take you there. So, and what's the name of that again? Well, it's called habits, and we know in 90 days you can form a habit. So we got to be on this, ladies. We've got to be on the health as well. So again, thank you, Ebony, for sharing your story and tips for wellness. It's been a pleasure. And where can our listeners find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Healthy is Wealthy Coach, or on my website at www.youdeserveyou.com.
Cool. And I will make sure I share that in the show notes for our listeners, so they can go seek you out. So I just want to take the time to remind everyone that Her Finance Talk is brought to you by the Her Finance Club. And our goal is to inspire 1 million women to start the money conversation with spouse, friends, or colleagues, because knowledge is power. And when that knowledge helps you become more independent, it translates to empowerment. And that includes your health, ladies, okay? So again, thank you to our listeners for taking time out of your schedules to join us today. And don't forget to subscribe, because we love hearing from you. So please feel free to share comments. So until our next episode, here's to your financial well-being. Take care, everybody.